Okay, welcome and thank you for joining us for another episode of the Jane Irrigation Training Series. I'm Richard Restuccia, Vice President of Water Management Solutions for Jane Irrigation. And today, like we do on a lot of Fridays, we're getting a little bit out of the irrigation box, and we're going to talk about 5 tips to help you shoot better videos. And a few people ask me, wow, Rich, why are we talking about shooting videos? And one of the reasons why I think this is important and you'll understand better is right now, and this is just an amazing statistic if you ask me, there's 1 billion hours of YouTube videos watched every day. And what we're really seeing is that if you want your brand to be important, stand out, you need to start incorporating video. More importantly, as we get away from a lot of reading, right? People are spending a lot of time on their computers these days, and they want to move a little bit away from reading, or they want to read a little and they want to watch a little. This is a better experience for them. As we start to bring our water management and water conservation and sustainability message forward, video is just going to play a much bigger role. And the really good news for all of us is that what we do every day and how we do it, video plays really well for. So today we've got, back again today is Michael Derewenko. He did a great session on photography a while back, super popular, one of our most popular sessions. He's back today to talk about video. Michael's is a marketing manager with Jane Irrigation, but Michael really has a professional background in photography. He's shot a lot of photos, a lot of video for not just Jane, but some other manufacturers as well. He's been doing this for a while. It's got a great background for this, right? At one point, Michael has been a irrigation contractor, so he understands water management. He understands the importance of water conservation, and then he's got this photography, video experience and talent as well. So we're really lucky to have him. Michael, welcome to the episode today.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Yeah. So, Michael, where are you shooting from today? I see the video running in the background, so I know that's not where you actually are.
No, I'm in San Diego. We're shooting emitters today, so it's studio work where we just shoot product photos. So, I'm consumed by tripods right now.
Yeah. So, all right, cool. Well, one of the things, I think about when I think about shooting video, and what I notice in a lot of people's videos, and even their still photography a lot, is especially because we're going to be outside, sunlight plays a important role. And so I think about, just basic knowledge of photography. I want the sun behind me when I'm shooting something, but oftentimes I'll get a shadow in my shot, something like that. So, well, what should we be doing with the sun? How can we really maximize the sun in our videos, Michael?
Yeah, so and we've talked about a lot of this relates to photography as well. Same with videos. The beauty of the technology where we're at right now in the technology era of camera and sensors is true for film and for our DSLRs, our still cameras, and our video. But a lot of the things carry over to both. That's why a lot of the production people that we have specialize in lighting. Lighting is one of their main, what they go to school for, and that's what they do on these big budget sets. In Hollywood is so much time is put into the lighting before you actually even pull the camera out. And so what I've learned in working with production, because I come from a realm with photography where we use a lot of artificial lighting, we use flashes, we use in studios, we use constant lighting. But then what you learn with video is ideally there's really no substitute for natural light. And so what we try to do is we control it the best we can with the tools we have. Those tools are very simple and very caveman-like when you think about it, but knowing how to use them, when to use them, where to use them, and where to put them on your set is the difference between an amateur and a professional. As you see in all our shots, like in this video specifically, the lighting is always very well done, and what we use are a series of tools. And so on the slide here, I put together a couple of very simple tools that anybody can purchase online or at a local camera store. And it's just a matter of reflecting the light or refracting the light. We're using scrims, which are just basically mesh cloths that range in 2 foot to, we use 9 foot scrims. And they basically filter the light out. And for anytime we're trying to film the human element, the skin, we want the skin tone to look more natural. We don't want it to look white or glary, which is what you get a lot of the times when you just pull a camera out and you start shooting. There's also, as we've talked about in the past, there's two ideal times to shoot video, just like there is photography, in the morning and then later in the day. You try not to shoot in the middle of the day. If you do, and you try to use a refracted light, and if not, we're usually shooting in shadows and then trying to bring the light from around the trees or whatever's creating the shadow back into their faces. And so, as you see on the video behind me, as the people pop up, it adds just a nice natural tone to them, but it also doesn't detract from the story you're trying to tell, which is ultimately you're trying to get the person you're interviewing story. You don't want people to pay attention to the fence behind them. And so knowing how to light a scene is very important like that, because if you watch a movie and you're all of a sudden your eyes are going away from the main protagonist in the movie, it's usually because not the cameraman, but the lighting just draws you away in the frame. And so lighting is very crucial. And as you can see on the slide, we use bounces. So they come in small sizes. They'll open up. They come as a ring. You can open them. All my amateur photographer friends, I tell them, instead of buying a flash, buy a bounce. Learn how a bounce works, and then you can start moving on to a flash as opposed to the opposite. Using an on-camera flash is very difficult. And when it comes to video, you obviously don't have the option of a flash. So you've got to learn your lighting. And like I said, we're usually trying to film in a shaded area with the backdrop lit up, and then we're trying to bring in light from the sides where we can, which is why in a lot of these frames you'll see is there's two guys, and one of them is bringing in the light, one of them is filming the subject matter.
Yeah, so this brings up two issues or two questions for me, Michael. One is using a bounce and I'm reflecting light into somebody's face, for example. When I'm not looking at them on the video, it looks like the face is just lit up too much. It looks like it's like a spotlight there. And how do you get over that, or is that going to be a problem?
No, I mean, that's definitely a challenge. There's tricks to the trade. The reason these shiny boards, like and me in this frame with the khaki hat, it sits on a hinge, and so when we're not using it, we point it. What we'll do is if there's, it depends on how much room we have, and you've seen the sets that we build in the backyard. We have a lot of room, and so if we can move the reflected light away from the subject enough, the camera still picks up the light and the detail, but it doesn't blind the person. We'll also try to shift their face. There's a lot of cheating going on with your torso to make sure that you're not looking right at it, especially because we don't want them wearing sunglasses. So a lot of times they'll close their eyes, and then we'll give them a 3 count, and they'll open their eyes right when we're about to start filming, so it's not as bad. There's also, that's why people use makeup. I mean, back in the early days of Hollywood, they were using reflected light and people were just sweating. So you use makeup to get rid of it. That's why newscasters have so much makeup, is all that light's burning them. The same thing happens with the sunlight outside. So sometimes people got to wear makeup, but yeah, you just do your best to work around them. And if it's somebody like we film customers, a lot of the times you feel kind of bad because you're just blasting them with sun at 8 in the morning. So we prepare them and honestly just make jokes about it, try to make light of it, and then try to have them so versed that they don't have to spend a lot of time in front of the board. And that's where the production and the planning comes into it. And once again, like we talked about before with the actors coming on set, is the idea is that you're not shooting this in their face the whole time you're producing the video. They're coming on literally to get their stuff, and then we can pull them out. And that comes down to the production and the planning. And that is how you have comfortable interviewees, as opposed to people not wanting to work with you. And I think we're pretty good at that.
Yeah, so one thing's for sure is oftentimes when I'm shooting my video, I'm by myself. I've got my iPhone set up on a tripod on the hood of my truck, and I'm just shooting myself. So I don't have somebody who can beam light at me or anything like that. What are some tips that I can use about sunlight in that situation?
So when I'm by myself, if I don't have a second, like a grip or somebody helping me, if you have to have reflective light, you can clamp it to tripods. I mean, I've had some pretty profound combinations of equipment before. A lot of the times too, what I do is if I'm shooting maybe 3 or 4 people and it's hard to get light in front of them, I'll just lean, it sounds rudimentary, but I'll just lean the bounce against my knees. And I'm usually squatting a little bit anyways to get even with their chins. And as I'm doing that, I'm just kind of moving them around. And then I'm kind of the tripod with the source of light. And then if the light's down below, it brings up like a nice kind of glow below them. And you can do that. holding it and shooting a photo is nearly impossible. It moves around. You usually try to find someone to help you, but yeah, I mean, I lean it against my knees all the time. I know wedding photographers do the same thing, and sometimes it's that simple, but you've just got to bring in that natural light. As soon as the camera sensors see that that glow, they're going to start metering off of your skin, and everything is going to be crispier, and it's going to be more neutralized, which is what you want.
Huh, interesting. Great tip. The other thing I have an issue with, and especially when I'm watching this, I'll immediately stop watching if I see a lot of vibration in somebody's video, right? It almost makes me sick. So
Yeah.
what can we do to make sure that our videos aren't vibrating too much?
So fortunately for the people out there, the technology's come a long way. I grew up, as you know, shooting skateboarding. And so I worked alongside a lot of videographers that were skateboarding while they were holding the camera. And so Sony had a VX series that came out throughout the 90s that people still use to this day. And the reason that it was such a great camera was because of that. It naturally got rid of the shake that was in the camera and that little bit of shimmy, and it got better and better as time went on. And that's what allows for a lot of those moving shots now, is because they have that inside. They can shake around and it holds it still. The challenge with the shake is as it's moving around, the camera is it's metering off of all kinds of different things that it's seeing and all kinds of different subjects and depths in your frame. And it's looking for consistency. And if your camera's not on a tripod and you're moving it around, the reason things don't look as crisp as they do is when it's on a tripod is because it's having trouble. You're overcomplicating what it's trying to do. And so what we do when we're not using tripods to completely steady our shot, we use gimbals, like you can see here. And there's a couple different kinds of gimbals. Some extend, some don't extend. But ultimately what it's trying to do is eliminate what you're talking about, which is, eliminate the jolting and the shaking that naturally happens when you're holding something in your hand. It also allows you to move alongside something, move around something, go up and down. It's been hit or miss with these things as for us, but they make very complex versions, and then they make versions like this where anybody can buy them.
Yeah, after your lesson on photography, I bought a gimbal. I was so intrigued by it. And then recently I was shooting a cooking segment for Master Gardeners here in San Diego. And, it was a one-take thing, right? We can't recook what we were making. And I literally tripped, right, when I was shooting. And I didn't fall down or anything, but I really jarred the camera. And as we were watching the replay, I kept on thinking, oh no, it's coming up where I trip, the whole thing's going to jumble. And I was just shocked. You couldn't tell where I tripped. That's how steady the gimbal kept the camera. So I'm really sold on these. And the other thing that's interesting, and I wonder what you have to say about this, is even when I'm still shooting, a photo and I use the gimbal, if I just shoot it myself in my hands and then shoot it on the gimbal shot is always clearer and more crisp. You have any reason why that would be?
Yeah, that split second where you're putting it on the camera on the tripod, and even before you hit the button, the camera is doing its job of pre-meter. And as it's pre-metering, it's already reading things. And so what's happening is that consistent environment that I was saying that the sensor is looking for, you've created it even before you hit the button. As soon as the camera is open on an iPhone, anyone that's ever had a dead battery on an iPhone knows as soon as you open it, the battery dies. Because the first thing it starts doing is it starts looking to those sensors for different readings. So you're providing it with the consistent reading. And then by the time you hit the button, it's saying, I've already got what you want because I've been sitting here for a few seconds. As opposed to when you're holding it and there's still a little bit of movement. That's all it takes for that sensor to try to lock in on things.
The other thing I do, right, and this is a tip you gave me, is I like to set the timer even when I'm shooting a still shot. And then when I press the shutter button, I don't shake the camera for that, and then it counts down. I think everything's steadier. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I mean, you learn when you're shooting long exposure shots at night that if you bump the tripod, it's gonna move. You're gonna get these like little shimmy lights instead of everything being still. So yeah, that's a good photography technique. And then as far as the gimbals go, and you being sold on them, I mean, I'm completely sold on them as well. I think they're like any tool. You've got to use them the way that they're supposed to be used. I think you have to make sure you read the owner's manual on each one of them. They're all different. We've had a number of them and I've had to read it, and they all set up differently. One of the complications that I mentioned to you the other day is as well, you know, when you switch from phone to phone, which we do on production a lot, the weight of the phone is different. So if you're going from an iPhone 6 to an iPhone 10 to an iPhone 12 Pro, you know, the weight is different. Well, the gimbal and the gyro inside, they know about, they can see that or feel that. And so it's going to throw it off. So every time you do it, you have to recalibrate it. If you don't, you're not going to be, you can't count on your shot working out. And as I watch the tutorials and read the different owner's manuals, I realize how important that is you've got to set it up on the tripod, put the camera on it, go through the steps through the software to actually counterweight it. And then if you don't use the software going forward to use the on-stick controls, it still remembers the weight and the central kind of axis that it needs to work off of. And then from then on, it's a lot easier to use. So out of the box is relative. You definitely still have to know and learn about it before you can use it.
Yeah, I'll tell you, I still watch YouTube videos to learn how to use. I bought the DJI, and so the other thing I really love about it, right? Because again, I shoot a lot of video by myself, and of course, in COVID, you know, probably more so now than ever. But there's a little hand movement I can use to start the video, and when I do that, it tracks my face. So if I'm moving around, that camera is following me from the tripod. That is so useful. And it took me a little while to figure out how to do it. But once you learn how, and it's not that hard, that was great for tracking my videos.
Yeah, you learn, it's like virtual reality. You learn a lot about humans and how they work and interact with electronics when they start to use them. And we talked about this the other day jokingly. Yeah, most of the time when I hand the gimbal to somebody and the phone doesn't do, they grab the phone and they just start doing what they want with the phone and fighting it, as opposed to like working around its ability. And that's why it is definitely a tool that you have to learn how to work with. But I mean, you're talking $150, $200 for one of these things. I agree. Use it once or twice. You get your money's worth out of them. So any more than $250, you're probably looking at something a little more complex, and you got to think about the production value. But these smaller ones like that DJI and this Smoothie one, they're fun to play around with. They're great.
Yeah, absolutely. So then the other thing that becomes an issue for everybody, especially if it's windy or there's issues like that outside, is sound. Do we need to buy microphones? Is there a microphone we should be buying? As Kevin Haverin said the other day, well, just shout, you know, and the iPhone will pick up your voice. And we don't necessarily want to do that. So so what should we be doing?
So audio is, hold on one second. I think there's a internet connection. All right,
Yeah,
you
you're
good?
good.
All right, cool. So the one thing with audio is, I mean, that's the biggest difference between photography and videography is to me the audio. I mean, some of the framing and, you know, I'm sure people would argue the editing, which we'll talk about in the post aspect. But as far as the actual live shooting goes, we've tried it a number of ways. I believe we've tried it every way that you see pictured on your screen right now. You ultimately have to remember you're syncing up audio, filming on camera audio, which means as you see in the interviews behind me, they're mic'd up. And so what's happening is as we film them, at one point, somebody is going into post and they're lining up the audio with the video. The camera doesn't know what's being said through the microphones. There's no syncing there. And so what ends up, we've tried it a few ways. We've tried recording people during the interviews and then just pulling points from them. We've tried miking them like this. This is probably the best way and the most professional, but it requires a sound engineer. So on a set like this, it's now 3 or 4 of us instead of 2 of us. And then we've also tried boom mics and on-camera mics. But like you said, the wind becomes a variable on camera mics, and you're usually not close enough to the subject you're filming to hear them, where you're not picking up other details. And we like to have the flexibility where, you know, while the interviewer and the interviewee are talking, we can move around them, we can shoot different camera angles. But once you're locked into on-camera audio, it becomes very kind of one-dimensional. And so we work around that. I would say for the layman or the amateur out there, those are the 2 best ways to do it. This Tascam digital mic in the top left, I think was $200, and it's a very good, it records on an SD card. The clarity is amazing. And we just kind of talk and interview somebody for about an hour. And then we go through and we dictate it all. And then we go back and match it up to the video. I mean, there's no real easy way to do it, as we'll talk about in post. That is the biggest difference between video and photography. And then iPhones do have microphones that you can put on them, but you're still, once again, you're still at the mercy of wherever the microphone is where your camera is. And that sometimes can be a little complex.
Yeah, Michael Gutierrez, he used to record a lot of video at the IA shows in the past. And he used to always give me a mic that I would clip to my shirt, and he would keep that out. Same type thing as the Tascom? Is that the same type
Yeah.
philosophy?
So let me actually make a correction here, because I'm going to get corrected on this. But this Tascam one, this is an actual recorder. So that's a digital recorder. That's what we used on this last production that we were working on the Fresno fields. On the video behind me, we actually there is a device that goes on top of our camera on the hot shoe that is it's tethering audio back from the microphone like you did. So when they put a mic on you, you put a receiver in your pocket. It's a lavalier. It's sending audio back to the camera's hot shoe and syncing with the camera. So let me correct that. That is an option. And then that's like $300 for the set, the receiver, and the transmitter. And yeah, it goes on the top of your camera. And then sends a signal back, but you can't use an iPhone for something like that.
Yeah. Okay. So that would be one way to get a little better sound if you're out there by yourself.
Yeah. Especially with SLRs. With SLRs, like you see in the bottom left corner, they have a hot shoe on them. It means it's providing power, and that means it's syncing up with whatever you're shooting. And so ideally, if you have an SLR of any type, that's the way to go.
Right. So the other thing that's big these days, Michael, is customer case studies. Whether you're in landscape or ag, it's shooting your customers, and them talking about your products or what they're doing, or just maybe water conservation in general has been a good one. But there's an interview to this, right? You have to have an interview, and it's different than just having two people talk. What's a good way to compose a creative interview?
So, with the era of podcasts and interviews, it was, it's taken me years to kind of figure out the formula to do it. I still don't know it. I mean, it's a process. The reason Leslie Stahl is still on 60 Minutes after 25 or 30 years is because it takes a long time to figure out how to do it properly. Cadence to conversation in general, much less somebody you don't know. You're trying to pull information out of them. If it's a customer like it is for us, you definitely don't want to offend them. So at the same time, you want to get information out of them that's relative to the story you're trying to tell. And that, as we all know, is way more complicated than it sounds. I definitely don't have all the tips. I put a couple on here that are that I kind of always try to keep in my head, which is, like I said, trying to keep the interviewee customer comfortable. If they can be comfortable, that's great. In these interviews behind you, this is at like 9 a.m. These guys have been running around since 5:30 in the morning, trying to work. And then we have to get them there, get them cleaned up, stop sweating, calm them down. If I remember correctly, there might've been a gin and tonic or a Bloody Mary for them before this interview, because they do get nervous. They start to sweat. They start to overthink about what they're saying, and they stumble over their words. And so sometimes what we'll do is we'll mic them up like we did in this last shoot, and we'll just talk for 15, 20 minutes to the point where you just kind of get that cadence and that rhythm to the conversation where you know what they're comfortable about talking about. You very nicely say, look, the yes and no answers aren't going to work. It comes down, our sales guys that help us out a lot of the times, we kind of pre-vet them questions and say, look, here's kind of how you give them a loaded question. So we get the response kind of that we're looking for, but it also has their opinion in it. We don't want them to repeat us verbatim. So this all comes into pre-production and pre-planning. And there's a reason that something that takes a week to shoot takes 6 weeks to 8 weeks to plan. So when you do get out there, the guys feel comfortable and you're getting the message that you want. And we interviewed, I think, 5 or 6 people on this last one, and I would say 4 of them are usable. So some of them just, it's really hard, and you don't put it all on 1 or 2 interviews. You just have to plan on everyone not being a pro and getting the best material and content out of the people you can. And then also, knowing the story you're trying to tell is huge. I say that all the time, and I know that seems weird, but you got to remember, you're ultimately trying to tell a story, even if it's a grower's story and how successful the product's been, or it's us as a manufacturer trying to tell the story of how well we think the product solves the solutions for you. You're still trying to, in the Ohio Wellness video behind me, if people haven't seen it, these are guys that are taking medicinal cannabis and making it into an oil form for terminal cancer patients. So we're trying to show that Jane Irrigation was a part of this, but more than anything, there was a way bigger, more important story there. And we have to make sure that between the interviews and between the visuals, that's the story we're telling. And we knew that going in before. You probably knew everything you're seeing right now in this 3.5-minute video before we even filmed it, because we made it very clear. We storyboarded, we scripted, and we made it clear the message we were trying to get across. And then all we had to prepare was the visuals, which is actually some of the easiest stuff once you've got, your lineage set up.
I love that concept of getting them talking ahead of time, right? Because I know even when I'm ready to, and I have a pretty good idea what I'm going to say, when that light comes on the camera, I tend to freeze up, right? I think this is something everybody does. I mean, people don't like generally speaking in public, and then when you record it too, it makes them nervous. So I love that idea of just get them talking, get it to be natural, and they'll forget about the camera. I think that's great.
Yeah, I think it comes from just like coming from the slide in the film era of cameras, probably being one of the last generations to do that. It's still hard for me to rifle off 200 or 300 photos. I still, when I shoot product, I shoot 3 or 4 under the impression that I'm shooting slide or film. And I also don't want to sift through a bunch in post to see if there's dust different than the other ones. And so I think that happens with video is us and the production crews we use come from the film age, where we want to make sure that these guys are ready to get the content we want as fast as possible, because we don't want to just sift through it. Time is money, and sifting through a bunch of footage after the project's shot, as you know, costs money, adds up by the hour. And as the guy managing it or producing and directing it, I want to make sure that we're out there, we're shooting, and we're wrapping before the 10-hour period, much less after that. And so it's just all planning. But
yeah, so a lot of times when we're by ourselves or just a couple people, we want to try to get everything in one shot.
yeah.
But even when I'm trying to do one shot, sometimes I want to edit myself out of the video, turning the camera on or off. Or what do you have to tell us about editing and what we need to get that one shot?
Yeah, so editing in post is, in my mind, the most consuming part of this whole thing. And we're fortunate enough that we just hand it off to a production crew, and I get some feedback from them. But once we've shot everything and now it's in the computer, now it takes a substantial amount of detail, where this is where projects get meticulous, and this is where kind of the fun gets sucked out of anything. This is why they give Academy Awards to editors, because the editing process is truly an art in itself. And that's where just overly communicating and being transparent with the people that are doing your post work is crucial. It helps us when we use the same crew that films and get interviews to also do the editing, because then they know, they've been there. But can you imagine working on a 3-unit set where you've got people working on pre-production, people filming it, and then people editing it, and none of those people really know the story? So you could see how the story could transform so dramatically over the course of production. And what we do is try to keep everything streamlined, keep the same guys that are editing as they are filming. And usually it makes it a lot easier to do. Some of the resources and the tools they use for editing, you can use, I'm sure iMovie is probably simple to do. It's all linear editing, which basically means if you look at the bottom of this first screenshot here, there's a timeline, and you have your audio track and you have your different video tracks. And then you're just like you were if you're making a song and you had different musical tracks or instruments, you would place them over and shift them around. So, and then that's how you get your transitions. And then you could manually put in whether or not you want to do fades or, different fade, transitions from shot to shot. And so that's all going to be done in post. And you could use Final Cut Pro, which is obviously $300, which actually isn't a lot. They get a lot more expensive, but you got to remember they're processing a lot of material, audio, video, any titling can be done in here. I know iMovie does all this too, but this also comes down to CPU capacity. If you're running Final Cut Pro and you're opening it, it's like some of the design software we use. These are giant multi-gig softwares, where if you're running it off a smaller MacBook Air or something that doesn't have the processing speed, you're probably going to want to use iMovie or something like that. Because remember, the footage 4K coming out of a camera now, about 25 to 30 seconds, you're coming up on half to 3/4 of a gig. So it's a lot of video filling up your phone that you're having to dump onto your computer, which is why when I watch those iPhone commercials where they talk about filming with your iPhone. I'm thinking, well, do they have 20 iPhones sitting on the side? Because you can only film, you can only have 256 gigs to the biggest camera they make. And if each shot is 2 gigs, they must be filling them up quickly. And so that's where a lot of it comes into, is storage, CPU capacity, and honestly, the patience to sit there and figure it out, or budget, because they do get expensive.
Yeah, so people are going to not believe that I'm really not getting paid from DJI on that gimbal if we sell any. But there's also editing software with that device too, which I find works really well, just even on your phone, right? And again, I'm not doing big editing. Maybe starting a little, cutting a clip in the front off and at the end off, and it's really easy to do. So that's something I found to work pretty well too.
Yeah. I mean, when you can record your audio into your phone and then the audio is embedded into the same file as the footage, moving stuff around is going to be a lot easier. When it's separated, it does become a little more complex. But I mean, I've seen the evolution, as you probably have in some of our production. Our value went up, and as the value goes up, you can see every little bit extra of effort where the quality just gets a little bit better with, all right, well, now we got an extra guy on set, or now we've got, a little more time to edit, or, we got a little more travel budget for this particular flick. So as that stuff comes up, you see how the production gets better. And, as anybody making it, you want the quality to get better and better, but you also have to understand your audience. I mean, I don't think our audience is ready for Oculus irrigation systems and IMAX, tape installs. So you have to know your audience, and that helps determine your budget as well.
Yeah. So we have a question from one of our viewers, and it's, in your opinion, what's the best software to use, right, and platform to use based on dollars and performance, right? Of course, there's probably some really expensive ones out there, but what's the best one that you get for your money, in your opinion?
Oh, I would have to say Final Cut Pro. Now, I'm not a post expert. I'm pretty sure that's what our production guys use. I know Alan Nazareth, our digital guy. There's a lot of not free but cheaper softwares out there to edit photos. Like you said, a lot of the hardware you get is going to come with some version of software to edit. It really depends on the extent of how much time you're going to plan on doing it. Just like photo editing software, you can either use iPhoto to make simple adjustments, like you said, or iMovie, or you can use something like Final Cut Pro or Lightroom and Photoshop, which are for more complex users, where it's going to take some time to learn. It's not just doing one video every now and then. This is something where you're going to make a hobby out of it, and you're going to try to compile stuff and add music to it, stuff like that. But I mean, Final Cut Pro for $300, that's a pretty good deal. You're going to get 2 or 3 years out of that before you probably need to upgrade it. So if you plan on making decent 2 or 3 minute movies or clips, I would lean towards Final Cut Pro, I'm sure. And there's another major one too that I'm drawing a blank on right now that some of my buddies use, but it's going to be $599. A lot of the stuff is also is the graphics. We haven't even talked about graphics. I'm not a big graphics fan. Looks like we have some titles coming in here. That's about the extent of movement I want to see with letters on the screen. But when we try to show engineering designs, or when we try to show how a valve works or how water comes into a system, and we use animations or illustrations to do that, you're going to need more complex software to do that. It's going to be hard to do that in iMovie without it just being a steady shot. To actually have vector graphics with moving elements to it, you're going to have something a little more complex. And then you're going to want titles to come in. If you watch like the NFL or any of those games, all the graphics, that's all being done in a separate program and then integrated into the actual edit or into the live broadcast. And so you're going to need larger software to bring that stuff in. But if your plan is just to move family clips around and add some music over it, you can use iMovie or DJI stuff. I think that Smoothie Gimbal came with some editing software. But of course, once you start to get complex, it's going to ping you, and it's probably going to want money. So that's why if you start to work with it, I'd be surprised if you don't get down the line and then it wants something out of you, because you're probably sharing, or you're probably saving a lot of that stuff to their cloud or their server, and they're going to want money for that.
Yeah. So Michael, this has been a ton of great information. Really appreciate it. I know I'll be watching this several times to get all the information out. But and as I learn more, right, I always have more questions, as I'm sure our viewers do too. Can they reach out to you and ask you questions about this after?
Yeah. Yeah, of course. Yeah, and we work with a really good team. You can see here picture. These are the Speed brothers. They help us with everything, and they're very open to providing information as well. Between the two of them, we have probably 30, 40 years experience between photography, videography, and anything I don't know, they help with. And part of making these is not. From a production and a producer and a director standpoint, hiring the right team is crucial to making these productions work. I've worked with poor teams and the communication's not there and there's friction, and the final product is definitely compromised. And that's why we've been working with them for so long, and that's why we have that consistency and quality, because we're all on the same page as far as what we want. And that's the role of a producer or director, is to hire the right team, not necessarily take credit for the whole thing. And that couldn't be more true with production. So
Yeah. Well, Michael, thank you so much. Fantastic job today. I really appreciate all the information. For those of you who have been watching, thank you for tuning in. I really appreciate that. As always, you can find all of our trainings on the Jane's USA website. And you can watch those on the YouTube channel as well. And if you like them, if you appreciate them, please subscribe. We'd really appreciate that. We're also on Apple, Google, and Spotify podcasts. So if you want to listen to us while you're driving from site to site, that's a great way to pick up all this irrigation knowledge as well. So again, Michael, thank you. Thank you to all who have watched, and have a great weekend. And we'll be back next week with a couple informative webinars next week. Thanks, everybody.
thank you.